we have a series of tipping points that we are just marching through here. But it certainly sounds like instability, churn, huge political pressure and chaos. The signals from Xi are that Taiwan needs to come home. So if Taiwan is the next flashpoint, then that will be a huge disruptive one. How will Washington engage in that? It depends on who will be in the White House, whether it's the melting of the ice caps, whether it's the melting of the Himalayas, a catastrophic decline in the fish protein. At the end of the day, relationships will matter. Alliances and partnerships will be what we will need to fall back on, especially. So I'm currently the director of the Defence Research Institute at the University of New South Wales. So the University of New South Wales is a highly ranked university with the largest engineering faculty in the Southern Hemisphere, a deep and long-standing relationship with the Australian Defence Force. It was stood up in the aftermath of the Second World War in Sydney when Australian influencers of the time realized that the war had highlighted some real technological education gaps in how Australia generated professionals in the services. So an engineering focused university, but with a unique relationship with the defence, also with over 50-year relationship in Canberra at the Australian Defence Force Academy. So if you could imagine in Canada, Queen's University actually delivering the programs that RMC delivers, that's what UNSW does here. So it's UNSW Canberra at ADFA. It's a faculty of the University out of Sydney. ADFA being a military base, that's where the training officers are. And there are 4 schools there that educate the future leadership of the ADF. So my role at the university is to bring the defense requirements value proposition into the university, into all of the faculties, into all of the schools and centers and institutes, talk to the academics from early career researcher to, tenured professors leading global communities in their areas of expertise, and bring their enormous talent to bear on partnering with defense to accelerate the generation of new capability across the tiered readiness levels, from basic fundamental, exploratory research in labs to tech demos to commercialization to deployment, all with a view to serving the national interest here in Australia and getting competitive advantage sustaining capability into the hands of the warfighter. Driven, of course, by this strategic imperative around the rate at which the threat is evolving out of China. So that's, and it's really interesting. I could talk about this for a while, so I'll just say that one of the things that I realized really early, Mike, was I came to academia with some sort of negative biases, but the professors in the lab who don't know how to tie their shoes and really don't understand the big picture. I was so wrong. Every day I meet extraordinary Australians and non-Australians. I mean, academia down here is it attracts talent from all over the globe. It's kind of like Dubai, So academia here. That's why so many universities in Australia with a population of 25 million rank in the top 50 in the world. Yeah. My university is around 50, so it would rank up there with McGill and Toronto, and ahead of every other university in Canada. Amazing people who, when they have the opportunity to understand why it is important to apply groundbreaking research to helping defense solve its future requirements problems, they come over really quick and get excited about it. So there's so much going on here in terms of hypersonics, quantum, AI, LEOSAT, edge AI, sensing capabilities, directed energy, guided weapons, undersea sensing, advanced materials, and then the whole sort of human elements of generating an armed service. So, future workforce, bioengineering. I talk to psychologists, I talk to psychiatrists, I talk to doctors, I talk to architects. I mean, it's just amazing, and it's such an exciting time to be doing this in Australia, because there is such a national endeavor around understanding what it may take to continue to secure the national interest here. And I just feel so privileged to have been invited now I'm an Australian citizen. I mean, my wife's Australian, my kids are dual nationals, and I was the last one to kind of come over. But it was such a privilege to be given this opportunity to serve in this way. And I always, as a Canadian, I always say to myself that whatever my team can bring on behalf of the university, on behalf of defense, on behalf of Australia, is something that is brought actually for the greater good of all, and especially the closest strategic partners like Canada, the US, the UK, New Zealand, and others. I can't imagine having returned to Canada in 2019 on completing my appointment as High Commissioner and being invited by the Vice Chancellor of University of Toronto to stand up a Defence Research Institute. And then having all of the Deputy Vice Chancellors and the Deans of faculties rally around and sort of welcome me aboard and say, hey, how can I help to help you to help the Canadian Armed Forces do what we know they need to do. So I feel very fortunate, and it's a lot of fun as well.
Wow. That's amazing. You speak like it sounds almost like a national mobilization, and you speak of the strategic imperative and the national interest. You don't get this kind of motivation without something external prodding that. Can you lay out the landscape that Australia is facing right now, and not only from your position, but Australia as a nation?
Yeah. So look, everybody speaks to Canada and Australia as strategic cousins. So the language I use is very similar. A large, resource-rich maritime trading nation, very much dependent on growing its economic prosperity on trade, on free trade with partners and like-minded nations, but not necessarily just like-minded. I mean, Australia's largest trading partner by far is the People's Republic of China, but a outward-looking nation, a democratic one, same values as Canada, same sort of immigrant and settler backgrounds, and so the same real challenges with First Peoples. But geography matters, and here's where Canada and Australia diverge, in that Australia is an island continent in the southern hemisphere, in a really complex, fairly challenging neighborhood, and the Second World War was a sort of a pivotal sort of identity forming experience in which Britain basically retreated in order to secure its own vital interests at existential risk. Obviously, Imperial Japan attacked Australia repeatedly. It's not just the bombing of Darwin that everybody hears about and makes you think that perhaps it was kind of like Pearl Harbor. No, Darwin was bombed many, many, many times, as were other ports and refineries across Northern Australia. And really, it was the United States that came in the Battle of the Coral Sea in 1942 and kind of saved the day. While Australian men were fighting and falling for 5 years in New Guinea, in the Solomons, and elsewhere. So that was the beginning of the strategic alliance. And when I came down here in 2015, one of the things that struck me immediately, Mike, was I had never imagined there would be any country on the planet that would consider its relationship with the United States to be so pivotal, so strategic, and who would be so obsessed with all aspects of that relationship. And I was wrong. Australia is at least as focused and obsessed on its strategic alliance with the United States as is Canada. So looking at the region, looking at its interests, what has played out in the past 20 years or so with respect to the rise and expansion of China under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party has really caused Australia to reassess, take a very sort of hard, pragmatic view of what's happening in the region, what are the risks, what are the probabilities, and it has led to a doubling down on the importance of its relationship with the United States, from a values base, from a economic base, and of course from a security and strategic base. And when I say economic, even though China by far is Australia's largest export partner, the United States by far directly invests more in Australia than in any other country. So there's that real integration there. And Australia, like Canada, sees itself as a champion of multilaterals, whether it's ASEAN, whether it's APEC, whether it's various bilaterals with Japan, South Korea, India, the Quad, obviously. Now we've got AUKUS. Australia knows they're not going to go alone. But having said that, there is a really interesting determination here that if it ever really came down to it, that Australia's vital interests were being challenged, and for whatever reason the United States wasn't here, and other allies weren't here, that there's actually a determination here to actually not give in easily. So that's why you see a real focus on a balanced, combat-capable force, with submarines, with amphibious landing capability, with long-range strike, with the F-35, with Predator. I mean, it's. I'm not saying it's they've got it all figured out, because if it ever came down to that, Mike, we'd be living in a pretty bad world. But there is this commitment to doing what they think it is their responsibility to do as the political leadership, to fielding a capability as best they can. So yeah, a long-winded answer there, but I hope that gave you something to think about.
No, definitely. And we were speaking last week, and I asked you for book recommendations, and I'd like to come back to those in a bit. And you came back with two interesting choices, and it sort of came out in your statement there, that the U.S. is exceptionally important, and it has problems of its own. And you on that you mentioned Josh Rogin's Chaos Under Heaven, Trump, Xi, and the Battle for the 21st Century. And I thought Rogin did an interesting job showing a fair assessment that the U.S. has some challenges. Nevertheless, Australia needs to maintain that alliance. And with that, you then mentioned Rory Medcalf's contest for the Indo-Pacific. And that balanced also that Australia is making some serious decisions. And it read almost like a primer of what the actual end of history looks like, which is more of history. Just go back and read it again. And I don't want to get too much into the book right away. But I just wanted to pull a quote from Medcalf, now that you mentioned sort of the capability, and the Australians are pulling capability forward. And I'm just going to pull a quote here. Deterrence is diplomacy, but also a clear communication of capability, will, and intent. And preserving the peace takes deterrence. Diplomacy involves power. It is not merely moral or legalistic appeal to a strong country's better nature. But it shouldn't be seen as an alternative to the levers of national capability, such as military force, intelligence, geoeconomic weight. And it's interesting how serious Australia seems to be taking the capabilities route. And I'm wondering if you can explain what AUKUS is. Yes, it's the subs, but it's far more than that. And you spoke of all the capabilities that are being rolled out across the forces, but also depth-wise with personnel. It seems to be a serious determination by Australia to play its fair role in the region.
Yeah, AUKUS is a profound strategic development that very few folks saw coming. Obviously, the big cornerstone is the SSN piece, and I don't I'm not privy to all of what's gone on, and like many, I'm waiting for the details to fall here. But what I'm taking away from this is that although we have the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network, which has been in place for 70 years and has done us all really well and continues to do so, I think there's been a conversation over the past couple of years, again driven by the threat, that we need to do more together, faster, smarter. We've got to break out of legacy procurement cycles, and we've got to take on the bureaucracies. We've got to figure out how to bring the whole of government towns with us in Canberra, Washington, London, and indeed Ottawa and everywhere else. We've got to figure out how to generate, commercialize, and deploy capability, as I said earlier, much faster, because things are happening now, are going to happen in this decade, are going to happen in the next decade, unless we somehow use that deterrence function to change the trajectory, modify behavior in certain other countries, and kind of focus on other things that are perhaps even more existentially important, like the climate catastrophe. But I think AUKUS is this recognition that we've got to break this kind of paradigm of plodding forward with all of its inelegance in sharing technologies and sharing interoperability and all that kind of stuff, and dealing with the relative differences in scale between what the US produces, generates, and what other countries do. And I think this is also being driven by an increasing realization in the United States that, as they like to say, the only thing worse than going to a fight alongside your allies is going to a fight without them. And so when I keep hearing the language is good that's coming out of US leaders, saying we need to do more across the capability cycle with our allies. We need to be removing impediments like the ITAR and I think it's called the NTIB and other things. I mean, we've got to realize that even as a United States superpower, we're not comfortable doing it alone. We're actually struggling to generate the force structure we know we need to sustain how the Americans view their own national interests. And so bringing partners along like Australia, of course, the UK, but all of the others, including Canada, France, other NATO partners, Japan, Korea, India, that's a team sport. So let's step out and do that. And Australia is a natural partner. I mean, again, as a Canadian, I kind of thought, we had that inside sort of relationship just based on geography and this sort of integrated economy and integrated kind of cultural exchange along that 9,000 kilometer border in North America. But Americans will tell you, and listen to the words that President Biden spoke a couple of weeks ago. Americans will tell you that there is no closer and more reliable ally than Australia. And it's not just rhetoric, it's not hyperbole. And it's one of these things I've observed with great fascination. Even Trump, the 100 years of mateship, when Malcolm Turnbull went to meet him for the first time on board a decommissioned aircraft carrier in New York, and with all of the kind of the 100 years of mateship kind of narrative, it's very powerful. So when I reach out as an Australian citizen now on behalf of the University of New South Wales to talk to the US Department of Defense research laboratories, and I say, hey, look, let's talk hypersonics, let's talk quantum sensing, let's talk all of these various disruptive technologies that we are all driving on with the same sense of urgency that we understand from the open source literature that the PLA is moving on as well with their military civil fusion strategy. The responses I always get from the Americans are, yeah, 100%. We want to work with you because you're the best friends we have. So,
well, that's great news for Australia.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the other two nations outside of this? That Five Eyes still exists, but the Quad is moving ahead with great speed and vigor, and AUKUS looks to be something of great substance. What happens to Canada and New Zealand and other countries that languish with regards to getting on with the threat environment right now and delivering what's required?
Well, look, everybody comes along at, every nation decides what its priorities are, what its where its resources are going to be applied, and everybody brings what they can to an alliance, to a partnership, and the Five Eyes will continue to be an extremely important inner circle in those concentric circles of strategic trust. I think that there's a really good moment right now for Canada, given the return of the two Michaels, given an election has just occurred and a new government is about to be sworn in. This is a really good time, and AUKUS, the decision, the announcement, Ottawa being caught by surprise as much as every other capital, and causing people, I'm sure, in Ottawa to kind of ask the question, well, why? What's going on, and how does this affect Canada's strategic calculus? I think that the opportunity is now for Ottawa to really get serious about its Indo-Pacific policy settings. I mean, I'm not sure what those policy settings are, and perhaps now's the time to actually sit down and get some, and then send signals through various multilaterals, such as the Five Eyes, that we as in Canada want to up our game, want to ensure that we are contributing in a substantive and influential way. We're very interested in seeing what is going to come out of the tripartite AUKUS view to greater technology sharing and new capability development. We want to be part of that. How can we be? And by the way, hey, we're looking for a new submarine capability in Canada as well. We're just embarking now on what that project will look like in terms of replacing the Victoria class when their extended lives come to an end. And it's really interesting that Australia, as a country without a civil nuclear industry, is choosing to go ahead with the support of the United States on and UK on a SSN project. Well, we're Canada. We have a very mature civil nuclear industry. We have had a strategic argument for decades around SSNs in the Arctic operating under ice, because if we're not operating under ice, we know everybody else is. So that's one strategic argument. Another one, of course, is that if the Indo-Pacific vortex continues to pull in interest through deployment and sort of multilateral engagement at sea. So, the Queen Elizabeth is underway right now. Winnipeg's over here. The Dutch are over here. The Germans are over here. The Australians are up there. Japanese are at sea. The Indians are coming through Malacca from time to time. It's the Chinese have set the conditions for a lot of navies to kind of pivot their focus and kind of get over here. So, notwithstanding a Shikunami deployed over to this part of the world in 2018, I think it was, maybe 19. In the future, if Canada needs to get a submarine into the Allied mix, an SSN is the answer. So maybe now's the time for Canada to kind of step it up, and it would require a sort of a whole of government approach led by PCO. It'd be interesting to see how Defense and Global Affairs Canada would work on this. I mean, Global Affairs Canada, needs to. I think the shift has happened in terms of seeing China not only as a trade commissioner, target-rich environment, but as everything else that it represents. And of course, the two Michaels really brought that home. So it would be a long way of saying, Mike, that Canada could come up with a Indo-Pacific policy that would be uniquely Canadian, especially if it's coming from a liberal government, but which would send signals that would resonate with how other nations, such as Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, obviously, France as an Indo-Pacific power, India, how they are viewing the strategic settings.
I'm wondering if I could pull you back to what your vast experience, both militarily and diplomatically, and now chairing it at the university. What can you really explain is going on in the Indo-Pacific? What has shifted in your perspective?
Well, there's a lot going on. Well, look, Rory Medcalf's book, I would recommend it to all of your listeners. Rory is a friend of mine here in Canberra. He's a professor at the Australian National University with a diplomatic and national security background himself. Very well connected with the Indian sort of strategic framework. And so his book is just really well researched, extraordinarily well written, and it provides a lot of historical context that many Americans and Canadians wouldn't have. There are folks in Canada who speak about Canada being an Asia-Pacific nation, but kind of lack a lot of depth and context to kind of frame that in. And so Rory kind of lays it out, and he speaks of the Indo-Pacific as a concept, as kind of a historical geographic construct, and China being such a large sort of center of gravity. He really speaks to the disruption that has been introduced by this current expression of Stalinist, Maoist communism with Chinese characteristics, or however you want to put it. China really has generated a lot of angst, friction, the coercion and the intimidation, the deliberate campaigning to to influence in malign ways democratic institutions in countries like Australia and Canada. This has been, a real game changer, and what it is causing and what we are seeing is the sort of spontaneous dynamic emergence of coalitions of the competent, of multilateral commitments to this isn't about containing China. It's about protecting what we believe fundamentally is the system of the world that emerged post-World War II, which with all of its warts and with all of global inequity and inequality and the one percenters and transnational criminal organizations and failing to all the authoritarian governments and whatnot. With all of that, we still have in my lifetime generated extraordinary wealth and discovery and expression of the human condition in ways that are just amazing. And for some reason, the Chinese Communist Party has decided that this is really a kind of a binary equation where powers rise and then they decline, and other powers rise, and it's their time, and so they're going to rise and they're going to shape the order of the day. And there's not a heck of a lot of value in that, I think, for many of us, and so that's driving this sort of new coalescing of like-mindeds, I think, in the Indo-Pacific.
My generation seemed to be shaped by September 11th, and democracies think that that's how it starts, right? A shot is fired, and then you then mobilize to carry out a war, and September 11th mobilized the global war on terror, and we all lost a lot of friends, and there were problems there. And you mentioned the Chinese Communist Party being a blend of Soviet Russia, Maoist, and now Xi. And that they seem to be waging a continual battle that some recognize it, particularly Australia and others in the region. And this gray zone political warfare is ongoing. But Australia got ahead of the curve. There's some indications that there was some election interference here and in a recent election and elsewhere. What did Australia do to really get ahead of the gray zone? Obviously, there's the hard power calculation, the F-35, the amphibs, the SSNs. But what did Australia do that enabled it to sort of have the resilience, the democratic resilience to fortify its society?
Well, first of all, I don't want to give you the impression that Australia is some sort of homogenous, Borg-like nation where everybody's on the same page and kind of driving with the government. Not at all. It's an untidy democracy. Like any other. In fact, politics down here is much more of a blood sport than it is in Canada, and there are widely divergent views on a whole number of issues. So I just want to make that point. But one of the things that I think Australia was really good at was they were able to separate security from economics in the China challenge, and they didn't get completely befuddled by, well, if we have a ministerial visit and say to the foreign minister in Beijing that we will not accept foreign interference in our country and call them out on it, will that adversely affect our economic prospects? Australia decided we're just going to be frank. It's typically Australia. None of this kind of messing around. We're just going to call it as it is. So they've been able to have these kind of parallel track engagements with China over the past several years, where yes, we will sell you iron ore, we will sell you coal, we will sell you meat and other agricultural products. We will do all these things. But we will continue to tell you that what you've done in the South China Sea is illegal by international law. We will call you out on Hong Kong. We will call you out on Taiwan. We will call you out on deliberately attacking our critical digital infrastructure. We will call you out on manipulating Australians of Chinese descent in our cities out of your consulates general. We will call you out on how you use Chinese language press in our country to shape opinions that are contrary to our interests. And so that there's that kind of frank dialogue that's going on, and that has enabled legislation to come in around various aspects of all of this. Legislation that might be problematic in Canada, it probably would be, but it's allowed the conversation to bubble up into the public domain. So now, having said all of that, I don't think the Prime Minister's talked to Xi Jinping in I don't know how long, maybe 2 years. The economic coercion piece out of Beijing is terrible. I mean, if you think about it, 30% of Australian exports are going to China. China is deliberately, parsing off segments of that export equation to pressure decision makers here to try to turn the corporate elite against the political elite, and it's not happening. And in fact, the export sector in Australia is managing to pivot surprisingly well away to other markets, whether it's India, Saudi Arabia, or others. And so I think that's a good lesson for other countries to look at. You don't have to, you can make a call based on what you think is best for your country, nested in your values and your principles. And I think if all of us, like-minded, were to do that in concert, that could generate a strategic effect profound enough to shape a change of behavior in Beijing. That could be naive of me, but we have to we have to drive towards that. So I don't know if I answered your question, Mike, but
no, you did definitely. That was great. It's there are those calling for similar type action in Canada, and it seems everywhere that although slow, a lot of democratic countries are wisening up. Before I go, I'm just wondering. You had two great book recommendations. What would your third be? Should we be looking forward into projections, or going back into history and looking at Bismarck, the Great Game, and a re-education of what reality looks like?
There's some books that have come out. I haven't read them yet, and I'm not sure I remember their name, but there are a couple of books that have just recently been published that kind of provide, I understand, an inside view to the elite, the behavior and of the Chinese Communist Party elite, and how it all boils down to relationships. It doesn't matter where you are, and how decisions have been made over the past many years involving certain personalities, certain families, certain legacies. Xi Jinping, for example, as a princeling, and his father's relationship with Mao Zedong, and how that shaped, and his father's incarceration during the Cultural Revolution, and all that kind of stuff. Just getting a feel for, trying to understand how China got to here from there, and I think we often, as Western, products of Western democracies, project our own expectations or conclusions or values onto how we interpret what we think is happening in China. Even the whole Two Michaels hostage taking saga. Do we really understand what they were really thinking in Beijing around the decisions they made? So I would recommend that folks look at some of these books that have come out recently. I'm certainly going to put them on my Christmas list.
Okay. And looking forward, are you hedging your bets with a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, or how do you think this plays out in years to come? You said within this decade things are going to happen, and this is serious decisions are being made to ensure deterrence and diplomacy and shape the future for Australia and others.
There's a lot going on in the near term. The signals from Xi are that Taiwan needs to come home. So if Taiwan is the next flashpoint, then that will be a huge disruptive one. I don't know how that will play. How will Washington engage in that? It depends on who will be in the White House. If as I'm reading, I read Robert Kagan's article a week ago, which was just it was very sobering. So if Trump owns the Republican Party, and if all of those states are re-rigging how they approve, I can't remember the word, but the results in federal elections, then it looks like Trump is going to be the nominee, and Trump could come back in 2024, and that could mean the end of American democracy as we know it. And so how he would, or that political view that he represents would react to a Chinese play on Taiwan, I don't know, but it's pretty frightening. And how Australia, how Canada, how France, UK, India, Japan would react as well. That'll be obviously a watershed moment. I also think, and I said this recently at a climate change disaster resilience webinar that I moderated. I think with the climate catastrophe unfolding, that notwithstanding China's drive to achieve its strategic aims by 2049 on the 100th anniversary of Mao coming to power, that we may be overcome with reacting to the extraordinary challenges brought on in all of our countries by climate-related disaster, whether it's saltwater inundation, coastal erosion, sea level rise, whether it's bushfires, floods, hurricanes, cyclones, whether it's mass human migration leading to conflict in other parts of the world, whether it's we have a series of tipping points that we are just marching through here, whether it's the melting of the ice caps, whether it's the melting of the Himalayas, whether it's the a catastrophic decline in the fish protein that feeds huge proportions of the world's coastal populations. I just get the sense that we may find ourselves, ironically, at a time where people might have projected a great power conflict around the rules-based order, but we may not get there because we will all have to completely reorient and pivot towards protecting our people from what's unfolding around climate. What that all may lead to is kind of hard to predict, but it certainly sounds like instability, churn, huge political pressure and chaos. And again, at the end of the day, relationships will matter. alliances and partnerships will be what we will need to fall back on, especially middle powers, if I can put it that way, like Canada and Australia. So and we will need to continue to want to attract the best human capital we have, into government, into the public service, into civil society, to deal with this. And I think that's another challenge we have, is that we may be falling astern in how we groom, prepare, generate future generations of professionals across the whole sort of government, civil society, academia, industry, that whole sort of aggregate, how we bring that all together to deal with challenges, I think, that will be as great as we've ever faced together.
I think on that very sobering note, I think that's a great place to leave it. Sir, thank you very much for your time. That was really appreciate it.
Great, Mike. Thanks for doing this. Congratulations on